And you're live.
Okay, so this is continuation of committee of conference on the FY 2022 budget. We have a number of areas of discussion that we need to come back to. One is how we want to proceed relative to the courthouse air quality issue for county courthouses, and the other, we had some language outstanding that maybe we can also get closed out. We had some discussion. I wanted to start. I don't know if Stephanie is online yet, but the 5 million to the Vermont State Colleges, and we had allocated $1 million, and that upon additional information from Representative Fagan appeared that was too great. So there were two parts of that. One is making addressing that particular workforce shortage with a realistic figure, which was more like 540. And the other was to open up so that if there should be funds available after meeting the needs of bachelor level, that those funds could be made available for master level degrees. And so I think, Stephanie, do you have the language that would?
Teresa has it to put up on screen,
Okay.
And she can send it out to folks.
Okay, well, we can put it up on screen. So I just wanted to say that we would agree with the additional language that if the funds are available, that they could be used to support those master level identified occupations. And we would agree that based on the feedback that you received from the state VTC, that to reduce that figure to the 540 figure that you were given. So if you want to put that language up, I have to go let my cat in. She seems to be in distress.
Yes.
Well, it's time for animals. My dog's in distress, so I got to go grab him.
Good, because my computer's in distress.
My wife keeps telling me I'm in distress, but
All right, here we go. Jeez.
Okay. All right. Oh,
there we go.
okay. So this is changing that figure to the 540 that you were given, and then adding the language, if you keep going, if demand is met, then the funds may be used in the following areas. So that's what we're agreeing to, and this language is reflecting the agreement with, I think, the request that you had referenced earlier.
Thank you, Senator. I think that does it nicely. I would just like to, just in case, you never know who's going to show up at the door. And if they originally want to come in and be part of a program, something may happen, life may get in the way, and they may leave. And so their scholarship funds end up being unused for a myriad number of reasons. What I was going to propose, if you had done this, and I actually did draft language, but I like your language better, because I had forgotten if demand from undergraduates are met, then funds, etc. For masters, I had forgotten that, so I'm not even going to recommend that we show mine up. But after your sentence 540, the fund shall be allocated for paramedic programs, that we just insert any unexpended amount of these funds shall be allocated for the broader purpose in this subdivision. In other words, if the funds aren't used,
that's fine. If the take up should be 485, then you
Right.
could, that would be fine.
Yep, I will send that to Stephanie, and then she can just amend. Thank you.
Mhm.
Great.
Good boy. I'm talking to the dog, not you. Sorry.
Oh, is your dog with you? I can't see it.
All right, so Stephanie, we'll make that, insert that phrase.
We will.
Okay, so we can close out that, I don't know if that's on the sheet or not. Was that on our differences?
It was on the differences sheet. It's all part of the G section, so it'll be just incorporated in there.
Okay. Now, Steve had some draft language that we were going to consider about excess receipts, which is a way of anticipating future federal dollars that flow in. And we've been trying to think about what's a reasonable threshold and process for what just goes through automatically versus what would trigger some kind of legislative review. So do you want to do that language next for us, Steve?
Sure. Teresa has the language and she can send it out and also put it on the web, put it on the sharing. So basically this has to do with normally what happens when federal funds come in. If they're a grant, it goes to joint fiscal and joint fiscal approves it. But there may also be money that comes in through an existing federal ID number that doesn't go through the grant process because there's already established line and the money comes in through that. And so normally what those monies come in are handled through an excess receipts process. So what this language does is put a requirement where federal monies come in greater than $5 million in a particular line or an amount, that the administration, if they want to use the money, they could hold it till the session. But if they want to propose using it, they come to the Joint Fiscal Committee, and the Joint Fiscal Committee can just do nothing and let it just go into effect. It can also make a decision that no, it needs to wait for legislative action. And there are certain criteria here that it has to be done, that it's consistent with legislative actions of this session. It's also has to be something that might need to be done quickly and can't wait for legislative action. There are 3 criteria by which they can solve that, they can act. And it's really just trying to capture the sort of larger amounts. We may be in a year where some very large amounts come through and we don't know in what areas. And rather than just, and I don't think the administration would, but rather than just letting them potentially spend it through excess receipts, it gives you a bite at the apple, so to speak. And that's I could go through it line by line, or I don't know what makes sense, Madam Chair.
Well, I can open it up for questions, but as you can see, what we're proposing is that trigger would be over 5 million in excess receipts. So that we thought was a threshold. So we didn't really want to feel that we wanted to get into the business of reviewing, receipts that were of fairly nominal amounts in the larger scheme of things. And this mirrors the language we put in for the JTAC, I believe, committee that we did on the transportation revenues. So why don't I open it up for people if you have questions? And it's sort of what's the right balance for that when we're not in session for the review.
And this is only for this one biennium up to now and when the session starts up again next January. It's not an ongoing change in the underlying law at all.
No. Oh, and it's just because there's so many unknowns about what may happen with the federal funding streams if further legislation is passed by Congress. Other comments? Representative Hooper.
Well, I'm just giving my colleagues a chance to reflect, and there we go.
Okay, Representative Fagan.
Thank you, Senator. So in sub 2 on the next page from what's being shown on our screen, it states that if the Joint Fiscal Committee disapproves, we shall inform the Secretary of Administration of the disapproval and basis within 30 calendar days following receipt by the Joint Fiscal. Why so long? 30 calendar days.
It says within 30 calendar days. So the idea is they could do it in 5 days, but
okay.
It's just that there's not it's not requiring them to do it in 5 days.
It's just that we shall respond within 30, but we can respond within 5.
They can respond within 1 or an hour. Usually
Okay.
what's happened in the past is very often these things can be negotiated where you
Yep.
turn it down and they come back in an hour and say, here's an alternative proposal.
Yep,
And you accept it.
good. No, just wanted to make sure. Thank you very much. I'm good.
Okay,
So I think we are good, Senator Kitchell. We accept this.
all right. Well, we've kind of had, as we said, other language we can reference in drafting this. All right. Thank you, Steve. Do we have other language that we have in progress?
I am waiting for a couple of pieces. I'm just getting a message that it wasn't seen. Would you like to talk about the climate piece while we're waiting maybe for some other language? You made an offer to us and
Okay.
why don't we?
Yeah, that's right. Senator Westman rolled that out yesterday afternoon, so you were going to take it back and give us a response.
Yes. So I suggest that, and then I don't know where I put my pieces of paper on. There it is. Not enough and too many pieces of paper. So thank you for this response. We continue to not want to accept this change in E234 and E234.1. We propose striking it. Your position is that you can continue it, that you don't accept our striking. We understand the goals. We understand this issue. I just come back to the House has not had a conversation about this and should have a conversation before we make changes of this nature in statute. I am not sure why it has to happen now. And that we can't wait for 6 months when there is an opportunity for the House and in particular the Energy and Technology Committee to, weigh in on this other than just being kind of forced in a position of saying, no, we want to not accept it unilaterally. We'd like to review and have a conversation. So we are pushing back on your pushback, and we would like to remain at striking E234 and E234.1. We had suggested an alternative to the Municipal Energy Loan Program and of putting all of that money into the Clean Energy Development Fund. You proposed an alternative way of dividing up that money, and we accept that. So thank you for that additional work.
That was the community solar, the 5 million and the 5 million. Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You establish a process of so it's 10 to the community solar, 5 being left for the Clean Energy Development Fund Board, and then you propose that 5 be allocated by the CEDF, but the legislature gets to weigh in on that. I think we would prefer that we just let the CEDF board do its job. But I am not proposing to change your proposal. This is in GA, so the section G 600A5. I don't think we would have done it the way you're doing it, but we will accept what you've done. Let's see. we had this conversation about, the thought that we were proposing to strike the, at 600A6, the money for the community action agencies to do their financial and clean energy coaching. You will recall that we said, no, that was not the case. We are in full support of that. So I'm just reading your sheet and reminding us that we had already agreed that we supported that, as well as the support of the mileage strike at 600A7. We did not propose to strike it. It just wasn't part of the energy package that we were looking at. And we agree with having moved it into the general fund. I think that was where we decided it needed to go. And otherwise, I think we are.
So I just summarize this then. The money piece, you concur. It's the restatement of the goals that were based on existing statute but updated.
Thank you, Senator. That is a much more concise way of expressing what I just attempted to do. I tried to run through the spreadsheet, but we do not agree to making statutory changes without a review by the House. But otherwise, we agree to your proposals.
Okay, and I guess I'll have to defer Senator Westman regarding the updating of the goals.
So the goals are really the only piece left in this. I would like to touch base with the chair of our Natural Resources Committee on that. I'm going to read his text. It's already consistent with the House Global Warming Solutions Act, which the Senate did last year in less than 2 weeks. And in that, with all great respect, I keep taking this back to our committee, and our committee is, I think, willing to work with the House on this, but is feeling like the House committee has not been as willing to work. And but given that, I think our committee will agree, but I just want to check in with it.
Okay.
right.
Let me just be clear. Our House committee has not seen a bill which proposes to do this. Their only knowledge of this is via this process. And as you know, this is not a process where it is good for the legislative give and take and analysis and engagement of the committee. So we get that the Senate wants this. We also have no dispute about the vast importance of moving ahead aggressively on our greenhouse reduction goals. We just are rather insisting upon a legislative process for agreeing on what those goals are.
Well, I guess if I understand the concern that was raised was that we passed this budget more than 2 weeks ago, and that piece is in there. And so if you look at the turnaround time for a major piece of legislation, which was the climate action plan, this time frame it seems to have been realistic or sufficient enough to look at those goals. So I guess that's just an issue around sort of that last experience in terms of how timely we were expected to act on the part of the Senate relative to a major piece of legislation. I think that's really the concern that Senator Westman was articulating, whether it's in the budget or in a separate bill. We all get put into very compressed timeframes, and this isn't that any more compressed than last year's climate action bill, but global solution. So I guess that's all we can say at this point, other than we will close that out. Is that now that we've just expressed our concern that within this 2-week period of time, that section was not taken up by the policy committees.
I will accept.
So we'll close out
Sorry, I
234.
did not hear what Senator Westman.
I said we'd accept. We're in a very tight time frame, and we're doing this in a very tight time frame. At this point, it's not worth fighting over.
All right,
Thank
I
you.
think you've expressed the concern, and that is around the fact that it hasn't been taken up. But we will not hold up this, and the other part of the money to move us forward is pretty important. So we appreciate your concurrence with the Senate proposed allocation of the funds. Okay, so we'll closed out 2 more sections. We also can close out 112 and 112.1 because I believe that you were holding those open because you viewed this as a package.
I'm sorry, I need to, once again, I'm wrestling with papers. There we go. E1.
It's E112 and
Oh,
that
yes,
was in
yes, absolutely, yeah.
All right, so gee, that page is getting pretty gray. I think all except for the fund transfers and reserves, that page is all grayed out.
Well, no, we have the E126.2, the Healthcare Task Force.
Oh, this is grayed out.
I don't think it should be.
No, it shouldn't be. I didn't, you're right, it shouldn't be. That's still
Yeah.
under development. I
Is
don't
it
know.
Yeah.
blue? Mine's in blue.
Oh,
Oh, I don't have a color printer, so.
there you go. I am looking for some language, and I keep looking to, and I don't have it yet. If we can find a handful of other things to do, I can get it to, it may be arriving any moment.
Okay. Do we have other language, joint fiscal folk, that you've been tracking or working on for us? Stephanie or Steve, anything?
I'm still, not for this morning, I'm still working on getting everything we went through those spreadsheets into language for you to look at a little bit later today.
Okay.
The spreadsheets we went through yesterday.
Okay. Why don't we go to the, go back to the discussion around the county courthouses? And the 800,000 and what we got for communications back from our, and which I forwarded on to committee members from Senator Benning and Representative Emmons. It is an area that they did take some testimony. And I guess the bigger question here, and I know that we have Commissioner Gresham, and that is a lot of this is couched within the COVID environment, and yet one of the comments that was made from Senator Benning is saying it is based on the assumption that COVID-19 exists, the fact it's eroding. So they didn't take testimony regarding, courthouses eliminating COVID-19 from the equation, and the House didn't, and I guess the Senate did not either. So the question really becomes one of, it's similar to what we're having with the State House, is one of which has to do with more air exchange and environmental comfort than necessarily the COVID-19. So the judiciary is requesting $800,000 for the design work around these improvements to the courthouses, and obviously what the institutions committee, and they had testimony from the side judges, or the head of the side judge association, that was sort of like, well, maybe there'll be federal money to do it. So it seems to be somewhat of a circular discussion we're having here. So that the institutions didn't act. The court is still requesting that these enhancements be considered. We did hear from Senator Benning, who's actually represented cases in the Essex County Court, and he talked about just the environmental undesirability of a very noisy air conditioner. So my question becomes one of what we want to do. Do we want to move forward and do an assessment and have it out there for future capital bills or consideration for future funding that might come up? And also hear from the Commissioner of Finance and Management on this as well. So if you want to offer any of your comments, Commissioner Gresham, and then we'll go back to see if we want to take action to sort of set the framework to know what the need is. But it appears that at least from the institution's testimony, as they're looking at state buildings, and even within the State House, it's what we would do for COVID protection is becoming a very different situation than it was even a few months ago, before we started seeing vaccinations and seeing a reduction in exposure. So Commissioner Gresham, you had some comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, kind of avoiding the context of the testimony in front of House and Senate institutions, frankly, that happened a while ago, and looking at where we are today, the intention is to be fully open by July 4th. We're all aware things could change, but that is the intention, perhaps earlier. So in that context, I think this may be less, if not moot, at least less severe. I would also note that there's a $9 million appropriation for judiciary in the capital bill. Our belief is that judiciary could take, for example, $800,000 from that, spend it on a design study, and then approach the Joint Fiscal Committee and the executive branch about an ARPA appropriation to the extent that that study yields necessary costs that they need to entail. So we would, counsel again that they have the ability to use money from the capital bill to do this design work if they deem it necessary. And then we can talk about, an ARPA appropriation later on this year or next year.
Okay, so the question is, do we say take it? I don't know whether the capital bill, and I guess we'd have to have Catherine Benham weigh in, advise us on that in terms of whether that 9 million was really intended for identified purposes, and this would throw that in the mix and of what was being proposed to be funded. Is Catherine on the call?
She is not. I can get her on in a minute if you want. I can get her if you want.
Okay, so I guess the question becomes, Senator Sears, you've got your hand up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think this is a case of, I'm concerned if we do nothing, if it would be helpful if there's flexibility in the capital bill to allow the design work to go forward. I think that there was confusion about the federal money and that money was going to go to counties. And could we, since these are county-owned buildings and not state-owned buildings, but usually the capital bill has taken care of things like boilers and county courthouses and things like that. I can remember back when I was on the institutions committee taking care of a boiler. So I think there's confusion about the federal money, and they thought that some of the ARPA money was going to counties, but I think the administration and legislature decided to send it to the towns. One point is that I don't know the number. I wouldn't hazard a guess. That's another opportunity for the counties to say, towns, we need some help from this ARPA money to, otherwise, it'll end up on your property tax. I think there's a number of things. The only thing I don't want to see happen is jury trials, particularly in civil cases where many of the county courthouses are used for civil cases and probate cases, the judiciary deciding they can't use those buildings because of airflow.
Well,
I realize what the commissioner said about reopening July 4th, but we're still in a state where I suspect there's going to be concern, and it's a separate branch of government. We can't tell them you have to reopen, for example, the Bennington County Courthouse if they don't want to.
Well, there seems to be a timing issue here, because even if we say we'll find the 800,000, whether it's capital or whether we, say there's might be a general fund for this purpose, it is not going to be immediate. This is really just assessing the need. So I would hope, to say that all these cases will not be acted on. I mean, you could have a horrible backlog by the time you do the assessment, and then you would, in the funding and so forth, we're talking about way out into the future. So I'm sure that judiciaries must be thinking about how they can, within the limitations of the buildings now, get some of those cases moving, because this is not going to, anything here is not immediate relief. As you identify that backlog of civil cases, Senator Sears. So, okay.
Catherine is on if you want her.
Okay. So Catherine, we've just, because you do so much work on the capital bill, the Commissioner of Finance and Management's referenced 9 million is in the capital bill for the judiciary. And the proposal or the suggestion that's coming from the administration is that within that $9 million that is in the capital bill, that the assessment for the ventilation in the county courthouses could be funded from that money. And our question was, well, if that was put in, was it already put in to address specific capital needs?
So I am looking, actually, I'm wondering if he's referring to prior capital funds that have been appropriated in the past, because I'm just looking for it right now. I do know that both the chairs and of the two committees had not funded it, and they thought the courthouses the judiciary was looking at, I believe, other solutions and doing work. I think there was some concern about these assessments were made when COVID was in full swing, and the senses that we're moving out of the COVID issues. So that would be another piece of it. I'm afraid I'm not quite sure which 9 million was being reviewed.
I will will confirm that for you momentarily.
There is a discussion in, I believe in the budget, it's passed the Senate and the Capitol Bill refers to, no, it was in the Capitol Bill, we're talking about the 113 federal ARPA funds and how they were, all three branches would get an opportunity to speak, and not one could spend all of it. So that's certainly another opportunity for those funds.
Okay, Representative Hooper.
I may be losing the thread of this conversation, but I believe our respective institutions committees heard, well, before I go there, we need to make sure that the air quality handling systems in courts are sufficient to reopen. This is a vitally important issue that has to be addressed in the reopening. I believe the thread of this conversation is that the courts, that our institutions committees made a request or considered the request from the judiciary and thought there was a process to attend to this. It now seems that we're being asked to override or not pay attention to that consideration of the institutions committees. So I'm a little troubled, but I want to make sure that courts can safely be reopened. So I don't know if we need to do some, I understand that Ms. Benham is looking at this information and maybe it's there, but we should make sure that it is contingently available, but I don't want to ignore the advice of our institutions committee.
Well, we can, we've gotten the feedback. I think we can take a look at it. I don't know if Catherine's had a chance to read those emails. It seems to me that they were acknowledging the situation. It was sort of like, but where's, there might be federal money. And I know that they were looking at that 113, although I think it may be, Commissioner Gresham, that 113, I don't know if you're getting additional information in terms of what it can be used for, may not be quite the same as what people thought. I guess the fundamental, and we need to go back, and that is, we have this request to do the, at least do the assessment and the design so that if future federal money became available or ARPA money was allocated, then there would be a sort of a baseline to know what is needed, where it's the most acute and where the expenses would be. So I think certainly, as Representative Hooper's talked about, we need to circle back to the two chairs and say, we have this request. And if we support reopening and safe, how we don't want to in any way not have the benefit of their thinking, but I think we need to confirm with them that if we were to consider funding this assessment, what would be their position on it? And I think that's the important thing, that we respect their thinking and the work and the testimony. Is that something that you could do for us, Catherine? Okay. Because we did get emails from both in terms of the work and consideration, and we seem to now be back to anticipating that there is going to be money out there, but at what point do we want to move, as Representative Hooper said, to make sure that these buildings are, and some of them just aren't even comfortable, like the Essex County one, as was pointed out by Senator Benning. So if you would do that, Catherine, get a read, that would be helpful, and then we can come back to it. Okay.
Madam Chair, I can clear one thing up. In H 439, there's 9 million for judiciary for pandemic recovery and response. I think that's what we were referring to.
Oh,
you,
that's
Adam.
us.
Yes, thank you,
That-
Adam.
Oh, all right. And Senator Sears took a lot of testimony. That's to get the courts reopened and what it would take and so
Yeah.
forth. And it did not include. So,
No, that's pure, backlog,
Yeah.
hiring, temporary workers, hiring retired judges to hear cases, that sort of thing.
yeah,
I don't believe any of it's intended. It's over a 2-year period, and I don't believe any of it's intended to be used for buildings per se.
mhm. That's, so that's the budget that you're referencing.
Right.
And that was to get the courts restarted and address the workload. Representative Hooper, your hand's still up?
Yes, it's up
Okay.
again.
Okay,
So thank you for asking that we get confirmation from our institutions committee about their druthers on this. If there is a belief that we need to appropriate more money, and I do not believe it should come from the 9 million that we have in the G section for the judiciary, may I suggest that the staff propose to us some language that would, as much as we're trying to keep JFC out of this during the summer, that any sort of approval we could do an approval process of what they're proposing to do rather than just a blanket, here's some money is. There ought to be some sort of oversight of what's being proposed.
well, I need to be clear, the first, as I understand, the request right now is the money to actually do the assessment and the recommendations of what needs to be done. Were you talking about actually appropriating some money to support? So if the assessment for the design should indicate something more immediate, that the funds are there to be utilized, I need to be.
I'm not being clear, I'm sorry.
Uh-huh.
They're asking for some money to go ahead and do this work. I believe that our institutions committees are going to say they would like to have some oversight of this process. I was trying to create a way to accomplish that. So so if our institutions committees say they want oversight in the interim, the way to accomplish it could be the JFC process with them being invited in, if necessary. I'm just trying to short circuit the conversation. If we come back, Catherine learns something, they come back. So what's our response to that? That's all
Well,
I'm trying to do.
Okay, I see two pieces, one of which is the first is just do an assessment of what's needed for the different courthouses. They attached to their memo was an estimate that it could mean anywhere between $8 and $11 million. So my question is, if we agree that we want to have this assessment done on the air quality of these county courthouses, then that's one question, and that gets to that estimated 800,000 that was requested. If we want to say on top, we could say, yeah, we're willing to support that. But then if that came back, and this is really where some critical work needs to be done, my question, I guess, Representative Hooper, is should we anticipate that there would be the need for funding and say 5 million or something would be available for release by the joint fiscal, depending on what that assessment revealed? That's what I'm trying to make, which I think is what you were suggesting.
Thank
That so I guess that's really the question. It seems like our our institutions committees were recognizing the desirability. They were looking to the federal funding to help with that rather than bonded money through the capital bill. So that's, I think, then I think that's really what if Catherine would get back is, would they support the request to do the assessment? And then if we wanted to allocate a certain amount in advance, but would only be released by the approval of the joint fiscal with review by the institution committees for some of this work to move forward at a quicker pace, depending on what that assessment revealed. Is that an accurate summation?
Yes.
Okay, so Catherine, is that okay? You're clear with that?
Yes, I will go get in touch with them and I'll get back to you all.
All right, thank you. Okay. And we're all in agreement that 9 million was not at all designed to support this kind of work. It's really to make sure that Vermonters start getting the system up and running, and the backlog, and people get child support, and criminal cases are brought forward. So, all right, thank you on that front. Anything else? Oh, yes, Representative Hooper.
Senator Kitchell, we had discussed the need to have some intent language with regard to the distribution of LIHEAP money. We don't need to appropriate the LIHEAP money, but we do need to say that we accept that 15% of it could be moved over to use
Weatherization.
Mm-hmm. And then we had, and I forget which the we is, but there had been a discussion of also using up to 5 million of the LIHEAP money to do really critically needed equipment replacement, heating systems,
right,
and upgrading for energy
Yeah.
efficiency.
Mhm.
I have some language to that effect, which I should have emailed to Teresa, but Maria, I know you're on. Could you just have that forwarded to all of the conferees, that language?
Yeah, this is an example where additional federal funding is flowing, and so it's going into that LIHEAP stream, and so it doesn't get necessarily appropriated or doesn't come through as a grant, but there are provisions within it that we want to. So we don't need to appropriate it, but we're actually saying we would like to have a portion of that. It's about 25 million LIHEAP bump. And so within that normal block grant is the ability to use 15%, up to 15% for weatherization. And then as just to remind everyone who's on the committee but listening, every year we allocate a certain amount of money. Right now it's a very modest amount of $750,000 to help with either repairs or replacement of heating systems. And so we have a lot of low-income families who participate in this program who have very inefficient heating systems, or they are in need of repair to make them efficient. And this gives us an opportunity to really use this funding stream, and it ties into a proposal that we got from the administration around swapping out inefficient heating systems. So this is an example of a different funding stream, but looking at how we can use it to support climate goals and carbon emission reduction. So if we have the language, then we can take a look at it. Now, my question here is, do we want to say up to 15%, or do we want to actually allocate the full 15% that's permissible?
Perhaps Maria has some advice on that.
Yeah, so I just got an email this morning from Sarah Clark, and they are concerned about their ability to actually spend all of the 15% of the money. So 15% would be $3.99 million. The total LIHEAP award is 26.6 million. So the request was that in this language that you see, it says it is the intent of the General Assembly that up to, and that up to is the request that was made of us, up to 15% of the funds received by the Department of Children and Families pursuant to ARPA be used to support home weatherization. And then up to 5 million be used for heating system and or tank replacement initiatives, including cold climate heat pumps. So it's your call whether or not you want to have the up to, but I'm just stating that we did get a request regarding that wording.
Okay, Senator Westman.
I would follow up and say in testimony in front of our committee, particularly during the latter part of our testimony, what the concern was at DCF is they weren't able to get the money out the door because they are so overworked and at their capacity to be able to do this. So I would say the up to would be an appropriate number. I think they're doing the best they can, but they're concerned about their ability to get things done and get it out the door.
So we've already given 4 million on top of the 12 million, I think, is the normal weatherization from the gross fuel receipts tax. So this would be another almost 4 million on top of the 4 million on top of the 12. Is that what they're concerned about, getting that much work done?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't, excuse me, I just can't remember the director of OEO in that piece, but she was the one that came into our committee and said they appreciated the amount of work, but but they were at capacity.
Let me ask, is there a carry forward? Is there a time limit on this? So, I'm just thinking, is this possible that we're talking about multiple years here? Can someone answer that question? And I noticed we have several
hands. Allocation is allowed to carry forward, and so this ARPA LIHEAP allocation, if it can't be expended in a time period, it would carry forward and be still available for that purpose.
Okay, that to me that's important. That we're not talking about necessarily within next fiscal year. But I think I have two hands up. I think one's Representative Hooper.
Yeah.
Maybe we could take the thing down so I could see people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Hooper and then Representative Fagan.
I guess I am, thank you. I'm confused by who the they is in getting the work done. I am so deeply sympathetic to all of our colleagues at the Agency of Human Services and particularly DCF with the vast amount of work that they've been engaged in. It is tremendous. But I think this is a matter of giving money to the community action programs who run the weatherization assistance programs. And they are the ones who are doing the weatherization work. We just had a conversation about our goals of weatherizing 120,000 homes by a date certain. And the only way we're going to accomplish this is by spending money on weatherization, particularly to these groups of people. So I'm a little lost. And if we can carry this money forward, I would say that we will expend 15%, not up to, provided that it be carried forward. Maybe Senator Westman can, maybe I misunderstood who is over.
It was the director of OEO.
Yeah.
And in her testimony expressed that concern. part of the conversation that came about around that as when we put the 1.5 million in for counselors. We had originally suggested, as we worked through that process within the Natural Resources Committee to come up with that we do 5 for each of the CAP agencies and 1 as an organizer in it. And she expressed the concern, and we talked about a higher level than the 4 million in money. And she expressed her concern that they were at capacity where they were and doing as much as they could. So I only raised that because that was the testimony that we heard. I would say that as long as it doesn't have to be spent all in this year, that's an important factor in this. But they are at capacity within OEO and working in the CAP agencies.
All right, I guess because I think there's no question OEO's administrative staff is really out straight because they're also doing all that homeless work, which is incredible. But I think the question here is being clear is the CAPs that do have their weatherization programs. In my area, it's not a CAP, it's NITO that does weatherization. And that is the question is, do they have the capacity to weatherize more homes? And sometimes that people would say we're that's all we can manage. So I think if there's someone from the administration listening, it would be helpful to say, yes, the caps are maxed out, or knowing that we've got more time, do we want to put a fence around it and say, we want to use this pot of money so that we can have it available, not just this year, but whatever, because it can be carried forward to support our weatherization. And I think this is an opportunity, and if we can just allocate that amount, maybe that's something that will help us out in the future. So that's my only thought. Senator Westman.
I think as long as it doesn't have to be spent this year, if we found next winter that it hadn't been all expended, it's an opportunity for us to take a second look and come back. I would just say I'm comfortable going forward as long as there's not that time limit of having to be spent this year.
Okay. Representative Fagan, I know you have your hand up.
Thank you, Senator. Just clarifying question regarding the ability to carry forward these funds and what that would mean for future allocations. I probably asked this of Stephanie or someone. Could this impact the amount of funds that we would receive in future years because we're showing that we have not expended all the funds in the current year?
I don't know definitively the answer, but it's a block grant, so I don't know that it would affect us.
Okay, just putting it out there, but thank you.
So that would mean that we would want to, at this point, have it clear that we want to allocate the full 15% for weatherization and the same amount for the furnace repair, knowing that we can stagger the work over more than one fiscal year, so that we recognize that workload compression. And we wouldn't be sitting here saying, why didn't you get it all out? Because we know from the get-go that it's probably a multi-year work plan that would be supported by these allocations from this bump in our LIHEAP block grant, which is a one-time bump, sort of like ARPA is a one-time bump. With all this discussion and knowing that we've got more time and knowing that we can come back and visit, but for the time being, we would like to take advantage of the full 15% allocation to weatherization and the 5 million for the heating system replacement for these are lower income households, obviously by virtue of being eligible under the LIHEAP program. And so this would be a major targeting of assistance for the heating system swap out, replacement, or efficiency if we utilize this funding opportunity. So Representative Hooper, I guess it was your language. So my question to you is, do you want to propose a modification?
Yes, please. I was not reading it closely enough and would like to say that 15% be allocated. I see that Commissioner Gresham's screen turned on, and I suspect he wants to convey something. It's not my job to call on him, but.
But you're channeling him?
I'm channeling him, yes.
Well, he can put his hand up if he wants to be recognized. Okay. All right, Commissioner Gresham.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Hooper. I'm just stating that I know that this language was shared with children and families, and I believe that their contribution was the up to language. I think that Sarah Truckle had communicated to Senator Westman. So to the extent that the money is eligible to be carried forward, I think maybe that would be a suitable compromise. But I did want to represent that I think DCF 2 was concerned about getting all this money out the door in the allotted FY22 time period.
Well, I think at this point, and knowing that the world changes and we can always adapt, we would like to allocate at this point the 15% and the 5 million for planning purposes. And then if it takes several years to do it, we understand that. It's just a matter of setting forth how we would like to allocate that bump that we're getting.
Understood. I will inform DCF
and it's not being insensitive to their workload at all. It's really saying, here's an opportunity to really advance the state's goal from this funding source to help our poorest families. And it will help them obviously because efficient systems and weatherization will help on their energy bills and burden. So, okay, we'll do it this way. And knowing that if it poses problems, but we're talking about just like ARPA over a multi-year period, the same for this as well. Okay, and we'll modify the language so we're just taking definitive amounts. Okay, all right. Any other language at this point? It's after 12.
Well,
yes, Representative Hooper.
It is after 12, and I would love to be able to share some proposed language for the G100 section, which lays out a proposal for how we will consider the investment of future of the ARPA money that we have received and not expended, but also of future federal funds that may be coming in. Senator Kitchell, you had outlined and shared with us earlier, and we were working on parallel tracks. And I have something that has been drafted, and so perhaps we can put our minds together, but I thought this might be a vehicle to help with that conversation. And let me just, so what I have done is used much of the Senate's language and the introductory portion of the G section, which talks about intent of how we're going to spend it. The Senate had focused on how we were spending in this bill I am suggesting making a proposal for the overall allocation of the, again, the ARPA and other federal funds that will come in, and have put them into categories. And at the same time, given the extraordinary nature of the opportunity associated with these funds from the federal government, and frankly also from the stimulus that we're seeing in our economy and state funds also, I am proposing also that there be a process of engagement with Vermonters to ask them directly about how they would be allocating these unexpended funds. And so what is their vision of transformation of the state using the extraordinary resources we are seeing? So what I'm going to send you, and I know you're going to need to read and talk about this, but I just wanted to lay it out. So what I'm sending you is going to be, one, we ought to put this much money in these buckets of expenditures, and two, we should have a process of engagement with Vermonters to ask them about how they believe we should be doing this work on their behalf going forward.
Okay.
I took this second idea from your language in E126.2, where you proposed, the Senate proposed a healthcare listening tour. And we know how concerned Vermonters are about the cost of healthcare, their ability to access healthcare because of those costs, and just, the wide array of concerns around healthcare related issues. But rather than, as you've proposed in E126.2, of having a healthcare listening tour focused on that topic, we are essentially, I am proposing in this language to expand that in public engagement with Vermonters to clearly healthcare would be a portion of that, but let's ask them about all of these investments. So I will send this to, once again, I get it on my screen and I forget to send it to somebody else to share it. I'm sending it to Teresa to share with you.
Okay, we had started out with that a task force, and it was focused on the healthcare, and we have had, so I think within this conference committee, some discussion about being more expansive if the legislature is going out directly to hear from people in all areas of the state, how to make it so that we're getting a broader, that healthcare would be part of this, but also how further investments would be made. We had left it that you were going to come back with some draft language around a reconfiguration or an expansion on that concept about the legislature itself reaching out. We have a lot of people that want to tell us what everybody wants to have done, but this gives really the legislature an opportunity to directly go out to all areas of the state and get that input on a more direct basis. It's always a struggle, as we know from our public hearings. We get the providers of service, we get advocates for particular areas or whatever. So it's always a challenge to try to hear from community leaders or organizations other than what we normally get through the budget process. So if this is something that would give us a different variation on our efforts to get that broader input, I think that that would be very beneficial. And so I know that the original language was written drafted by Jen Carby, and I believe she's sort of building on this expanded version. The other part was a discussion that we had earlier around the fact that the governor's got a 3 or 4 year proposal of what would be intended. And with the uncertainty of federal dollars coming in, what would be sort of and I think based on what Representative Hooper has said, maybe the amounts, I had whacked off some thinking about, well, ARPA plus, but she may have really put those figures on steroids. So I'm interested to see what would be recommended. And we can come back. Are you ready to do that now, or would we do it later?
We have set, I believe you have received this now. But I am sure you need to read it before we can have a conversation.
Okay, 12:17. That was 2 minutes ago.
Yes.
Okay.
And
And obviously,
yeah,
we'll have to, because we're really,
I would, as you are reading it,
okay.
I am not off on my math. I have added in more than what we have received in ARPA funds, but as we know, we have made some investments in this sort of transformative efforts that are also coming out of general funds and other sources of state funds. So my buckets of funding add up to more than the 1.1 billion that we are receiving.
Yeah,
expect to receive in
mine
ARPA.
did too.
Yeah.
Mine did too.
Yeah.
And actually, my question to you is, are the amounts here inclusive of what we're already putting forward in the budget?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So
And-
actually, I'm not so sure we're that far off.
Yeah. Well, but look at it and think,
Yeah.
and again, this is, what we're talking about is saying there are transformative monies that are available to us. We're trying to broadly say how we will spend those monies. So let's
Mhm.
make sure we get that dollar amount
Yeah.
right. And I don't think we're limited by the 1.1 billion we've received in ARPA. I think we are anticipating additional funds coming in
Mhm.
from the
Yeah.
federal government, as well as the extraordinary receipts we're seeing on the state level.
Yeah, I understand. And my totals were
Yeah.
above that too. So, so let's take a look, and we can come back. And I think we're supposed to be in caucus, but I think this takes precedent. Other areas of language.
I'm looking to my House colleagues. Do we have anything else? I think, have we done our lists? I am waiting for the healthcare language, the E126.2, which sparked this conversation that we've just had. But there's the other part of it is the healthcare issue, and we're still working that one out. I hope to bring it to you shortly.
Might I ask, economic development, do we have a update on that?
I
No.
have not heard today, but I bet other people, I shouldn't have answered. Maybe JFO has some insight.
If I may, we did just get some information from David Hall, and I need to sit down and compare it to what's in the budget. I've done a preliminary comparison. But I just want to have a chance to talk to the staff about it. But we have gotten some information that we can work with.
Oh, okay. Oh, great.
Well, I don't know where the economic development conferees are. And I think we are now moving to contingency plans. If they fail to come to a conclusion, then we have to do something. And, the clock is ticking. So
Yeah.
I think what Ms. Bellevue may have received are our contingency planning process, but yeah.
Okay. Well, hope that we can work out something. Otherwise, it becomes, all it does is move the debate to a different forum.
Yeah. Yes.
Mm.
It's so much more preferable if the conferees will resolve it and let us know how to settle our pieces.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And maybe, and like we do in so many areas, we end up in the middle. So I think then we're supposed to go
Yeah,
back
I
on.
beg your pardon. Excuse me for interrupting. As was the case with the judiciary, the courthouse reopening, Representative Jessup has received some information from, I think, the Agency of Natural Resources around a concern about hazard mitigation. And could we just take a moment with what?
Sure, we all got that email from Secretary Moore.
Yeah.
And let me, okay, and this was part of the governor's proposal. And if I remember, this is to buy out property that is flood prone, but didn't qualify under the FEMA standards. And so this is something that is not in either budget, and we're being requested to consider it now.
That's correct. It is the $5 million, 4.8 would go to DPS, and then the 120 to DEC. And these are often the mobile home parks. And as you note, they're not federally, if they're not covered in the federal FEMA maps, which are often out of date, then they fall through the cracks. And then we keep rebuilding over and over using state and federal sources, and people are vulnerable. And so the idea is that this would be an investment to try to stop that cycle, and it would reclaim some of those properties, and it would be used to move people to safer ground. And as you know, this was already in the governor's proposal, and it appears to be a piece that somehow has fallen through the cracks.
Well, I gotta look at it here. So what you're doing is the House is asking, saying that you support putting this language in. I'm gathering that's what you're asking, that this is something that has come up. And my question is back to Commissioner Gresham, because one of the thoughts, and this is gets back to why we moved the dams, which we know certainly are a major concern and risk, to general fund. So is this an appropriation that we would have to make out of ARPA?
This would be ARPA. There are a couple things I'd say. One, there is language in ARPA that does provide for future pandemic resilience. It doesn't say future COVID-19 pandemic resilience, but future pandemic resilience. So we're a bit more confident that this would apply for ARPA. The other thing I'd mention is there's also some opportunities here to invest in supporting infrastructure in some low-income communities, like roads in particular, I believe that Secretary Moore fingered, that are flood vulnerable. And so I think all in all, this is an area that can set us up for future troubles, not just
I'm
pandemic.
a little, oh, is there a dog? I thought I could hear an animal. My question, I'm a little confused. Reference is made to 5 million, but the request has 25 million.
That's
and
the
then
total for the 3.5 year period.
So I just want to be clear, what is being requested at this point is 5 million?
That's correct for fiscal 22.
And that's what the House is saying they would support, is that 5 million.
Yes.
Okay. And this is ARPA.
That's correct.
We haven't really talked about it. Senate, let it go. Our concern is obviously around the location of mobile home parks, and or low-income housing oftentimes is where it's most flood prone. I'm getting nods from the conferees that, and did you get the email from Secretary Moore, Senator Westman, and Senator Sears? Okay. No?
I will forward her email, Madam Chair, since I was copied on it, I can forward.
Oh, I see. It just came to Mary, me, you, and Steve Klein. So I guess you wouldn't have gotten it. Did you get that earlier, Kimberly?
I did not get the email, but I've had a number of conversations around the topic this morning.
Okay. I've had no requests directly. So I need to ask my commissioners, were you contacted at all with this request? I guess not. Senator Sears, Senator Westman?
No.
No.
So, Madam Chair, I sent the letter to Teresa, who can circulate it to the committee. This request came in this morning, and I have to fall on my sword a little bit here, and that in the crush of the end, I had intended to bring this up, and I did not. Secretary Moore reminded me of that, and so I have to take some of the blame for that, I'm afraid.
On its
Well,
way.
I will say Secretary Moore did bring this up to us. And I can't remember exactly the moment and the time, but it was after the budget got done. She did bring it up with us, but I don't have any of the details.
Okay. And Representative Jessup, who have you, obviously you've had the benefit of some conversation that the Senate conferees have not had with someone in the administration?
Right. I've had conversation, Julie Moore, Secretary Moore and I spoke, and she had flagged that this had fallen through the cracks. And so then I reached out to my House counterpart who has this portfolio on HAC, and she understood and was okay with it. And then I went to House Natural and checked with the chair, as well as the person who handles our financials in that committee, who's quite familiar with the topic. When she's not, enough said there. And all of them were supportive. And again, as has already been said by Mr. Gresham, that this appears to have been an issue that has fallen through the cracks and not one that people have disagreement or problems with, is my takeaway based on just this morning's research.
Okay. All right. So then you have the letter. Obviously, the Senate conferees are just getting, Secretary Moore's email was only directed to the chairs, and I did not have it came in 11:03, so I did not have a chance to forward it to either Senator Sears or Senator Westman.
But it has.
I think no one is debating the merits of doing it. It's just hard to get information at this point. We haven't had the opportunity. We're on the floor at 10. So in terms of all the connections that you've been able to make in the House, we have not done. But this is a committee of conference and we are authorized to make those decisions. And so I'm going to agree that we should put that funding in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're talking about the 5 million,
Yeah.
as was
Yeah.
referenced in Secretary Moore's email to us.
That's correct. Yeah.
All right. Any other? So we're on the floor at 1. We have to go back. Let me ask, the bill that we have just been sent in Senate Appropriations is the registration of contractors. Does that carry an appropriation? I'm just wondering if you took that bill up, since we have the advantage of your being here. This has nothing to do with committee of conference. I'm just wondering, haven't had a chance to look at it.
It has been through our committee, and this will tell you how full of holes my brain is. We voted it out positively. Maybe Reps Jessup or Fagan can remind me. There's a fee associated with it, but we needed to make an appropriation before the fees were up and running. No, I'm remembering that one wrong. That's S79.
Yeah, that's the rental. Mhm.
Yeah. Kimberly or Peter, can you help remind me of the never mind. Kimberly, Peter didn't vote for it.
157.
157.
That's right.
Yep. So there's, I'm looking at the fiscal note right now. Fiscal provisions. Okay, so
All right, there is a fiscal note then. Maybe
there
we
is a
could.
fiscal note.
Okay, Stephanie or or Chrissy, if you're on, if you could get us that fiscal note, I guess that would be helpful. Okay.
$200,000 yearly position costs.
Okay. All right, and that's an H bill.
Yes.
What has happened to crossover?
Got crossed out.
Well, I hate to, I realize I'm probably feeling a bit crabby, but we're trying to wrap things up and we're still getting, well, maybe it came over. Maybe it did make crossover.
I think it did.
And it's just been in our side. I think maybe that's,
yes.
Although I'm not sure. So, all right.
I don't know.
All right, so if we could get the fiscal note, but in terms of this committee, we need to look at the draft language relative to the expanded task force or the community engagement piece, and look at the amounts that are there, and I think Representative Hooper was clear that hers were all inclusive. Mine were additive to what was in the budget. So when you put them together, I'm not so sure we're too far off. But we'll take a look. And we're going to have to come back. I'm just thinking about the time, and we still have we've taken care of some language. My question, Stephanie, many of the things about the ARPA funding and so forth, we've taken care of with the spreadsheets that we've done.
Yeah, as far as I know, the only open ARPA pieces, you have the request that just came in on the mitigation. You had another request this morning related to housing, and then the H-159 slate of items is what I have open.
Okay, that's what you have open.
Yep.
Do you, Stephanie, do you have an updated H159, that's the economic, never mind. I was thinking you were saying the G sections.
I will have an updated, it's nearly ready to go. And I have language that's nearly ready for you to look at for the G section. That, because you do want to look at the, I mean, I want to make sure that the language pieces that we have in there are what you want.
Okay,
The-
Senator Westman.
I just say to you that the hazard mitigation piece that we just approved, Julie Moore did make a presentation that included that 25 million in total before the Senate Natural Resources Committee on April 9th.
Okay. All right.
Senator
Representative
Mitchell,
Hooper, yes.
you were asking about crossover. The H157 was a committee bill. So as you know, that has a different way of being,
Yeah,
different
okay.
relationship to crossover.
All right. I'm just trying to think about
Back to me,
scheduling
so
another.
This has
Sorry,
been, this has been an extremely difficult session with bills coming, flying out at the last minute. You know, we dealt with some, you know, you got S99, we got H225, all things late, and crossover has been ignored generally this year. I'll just say that so that it's clear that I realize there are different ways of looking at it, but I'm not suggesting the House is guilty and the Senate's not. I'm suggesting they're all been guilty this year. But it is frustrating at the end when you have an H bill, H159, that appears to be holding up any resolution of the conference committee.
yeah, and it's been in our Senate Economic Development for a while.
Well, on that particular bill, that has been there for a while.
That's the issue, is that it makes it difficult for, and I've got bills I'm dealing with too from judiciary and dealing with, you know, the Senate Judiciary Committee and the House Judiciary Committee with different bills. But that's normal
Yeah.
work. But this thing has so many connections to this budget that it's difficult to have.
Well,
it back in there.
I think what we're feeling is that in the end, what the holdup on one committee and another, all of it converges on a small group of people. And in Senator Sears' case, he's also chair of another committee, so he's having to juggle bills there as well. So it does, for whatever reason, and it's not one side versus the other. It's just, what does that mean in terms of how we're feeling and the things that we're trying to juggle?
Yeah.
So I think we have the economic development piece. We've got the task force piece and the intent language to take a look at. The other two big areas are the 3% rate increases, and then the other is the funding and actually starting a pre-funding of our teachers' retirement obligation as was proposed by the Senate, and that still is open. Anything else? I'm just trying to see, because we're operating, obviously this is Tuesday. It would be desirable to be out of here Friday. I would hate to have the Senate out on Friday and the House have to come back on Saturday, but sometimes that happens.
You would not hate it as much as we would hate it, Senator, and our goal is to get this done by Friday. So that is the reason I'm making contingency plans with regard to H159. If the conferees don't get it done, then I think we need to figure out how we're going to move our way through that rather than waiting for them. We know that the teacher's retirement is a very important, large issue for all of us. And so yes, I agree with your list of what is remaining.
Okay.
I just want to say our goal is to be finished by Friday, and we are doing our best to get us there. I think we may still see a bit of language around the courts that's being thought about. The HVAC system.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
that's
Yeah, we'll
one
wait for
small
Catherine
thing.
on that.
Yeah.
And the other is the additional housing to put more money in because of the construction costs being higher. And whether we want to move up that ARPA, we have it at 52. And the question, I think, or the request is to move that by another 30.
Isn't it shocking the way we're not talking about $30 either.
No,
We're talking about a lot more zeros that is just confounding to me, but we need to do important work with this money.
yeah. So I don't know, we have the request and I don't know if that came from the housing or exactly what is the basis for that, or if in fact the market is suggesting that supplies are 30% higher than they would have been. I've also heard that there will be some moderation of these prices. Some of it is just getting, the sawmills and the wood products back up and running. And so I don't know if the 30 million represents an estimated increase against something, and where is the source of that suggested amount of money in terms of what is the data behind it.
All of the above, Madam Chair. I mean, we've heard more than anecdotal evidence that the cost of getting something done, even 6 months ago, as I mentioned, your dollar would have gone much further than it goes today. And yes, I would say that economics suggests that the trend will slow or stagnate, but we do know that we don't have the spending power that we did when we first drew up these estimates and presented an ARPA proposal. And really what it's getting to is, as this committee has spoken about over time, it's providing certainty to the housing community that we're there and we have the horsepower to get done what we want to get done. And it may be that this isn't needed, but I suspect over the 3.5-year period, we'll find more than enough ways to spend this amount of money in providing housing. Anyway, that's the nature of it.
Okay. Well, in the governor's proposal, I believe you had 249 in ARPA for housing
Total.
over that multi-year period of time. Before
That's
we're
right.
done, we're, between general fund and ARPA, we're going to be moving a lot of that out in the first year.
Right.
So your recommendation, you're asking to have the 52 million increase by an additional 30.
That's correct. And this would be focused on, in our view, what we'd call rapid housing, but it's basically providing housing for those people who are either in shelters or in motels, hotels, and the like, trying to get a roof over their heads and trying to deal with their situation
Well,
on a more
I think
permanent
we need
basis.
to talk about that
Yeah,
because that's different than the cost of construction. And
Yeah.
also the whole notion that what we're trying to do is make progress on affordable housing, and that we're talking about mixed housing and not concentrating, families with more limited income in what have been historically stigmatizing and oftentimes very difficult living environments. So your last comments raise a whole host of questions.
There
in
is no
terms of what
intention
this-
to do that. There is no intention to concentrate housing. But it's simply acknowledging that what we're trying to do for people in building new and securing space and so on, and expanding shelters and all of that is just becoming much less approachable than it was even 6 months ago.
That's
We're not talking
Representative-
about building segregated communities.
Representative Hooper.
Thank you. When I heard the number I had assumed that this was a proposal of an additional allocation to the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board for their housing programs. If this is a proposal to provide this money across the array of housing efforts that we have been engaged in, I believe we need to see a breakdown of how this would be used. Only because that it's our obligation to be thoughtful about how we're allocating money. It has nothing to do with a desire to not provide appropriate funds for housing, but just a kind of a blank check as opposed to knowing where this money is going. I think we need a little more information.
And
Understood, and I will provide.
okay, because, you know, our understanding was that was what that 41 million, it was out of that rental assistance pot, not the ARPA. And I realize that there's some limitations on that. But if we're talking about a modification to that 41 million, then what is, which we only approved, what, a couple of weeks ago, then we would like to know that.
I will get more information
Okay.
prior to
All
your
right.
next meeting.
Which we haven't decided yet.
Understood.
Let's see, we're on the floor. Do you think we've got the intent, we can take a look at that. Some of the other, obviously the task force, that's got to be reviewed by leadership because that's a legislative initiative. And I don't know if that has been sent to Carolyn Wesley and Connor, but we should.
So what I will share that out with our leadership teams on both sides, and I will copy the. I won't do this. I'm going to ask Teresa to do this for everybody. Don't trust me to get it done.
All right.
I
So
keep
Teresa,
forgetting to push send on my emails.
I do that too. And then I go back and say, oh my gosh, I thought I'd responded. And then you discover it's in the draft file.
Yeah.
So Teresa's going to send out the draft to both the speaker's office and the pro tem's office.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And this is of the G section, the G100 that
Yeah.
I proposed. Yeah, thank you.
That's around the intent language.
Yes. Which also has at the end of it, the public engagement process. We also need to get the healthcare language which is still being discussed. Which is a separate piece.
Separate from the task force or the engagement? I'm
So there are
not
two
sure.
things. The Senate proposed in E1262 a healthcare task force and engagement process.
Right. And now we're going to expand it.
Right. But
Okay.
we are expanding the engagement process in this intent language. Separately, there is an interest in having a healthcare task force that I believe does not have the same engagement process. So those have been pulled apart, and we had proposed some alternative language to that, and that needs to be sorted out. Our chair of healthcare committee is, I believe, working with other people on just trying to find some common ground on that language. But I need to check with people to see where we are on that.
So are you talking about, you think the plan is to have two legislative initiatives to go out and meet with community?
One, to meet with community, And I am unclear on what was proposed on the Senate side as an alternative. But I know that there is a view that there should be a task force and some study work, but not going out into the community for around healthcare issues.
Okay, well, that's right. There was funding to retain the services of someone who could do actuarial work and data collection and that kind of higher level policy support, which is a more detailed than
Yes.
piece. So I understand the need to keep that capacity, but I gather so we need to look at the language around what that community engagement will entail, and then how it will be connected to that more detailed examination on the healthcare costs and options inside. I thought you were writing up draft language for us to look at to expand that task force, but now I'm quite confused as to who is doing what.
So in the language that has now been emailed to you around the G section of the bill is intent language with regard to spending and additional language.
Hazard mitigation buyout, is that going in the G600 section?
And additional language around the speaker and the pro tem's office being engaged in a statewide outreach effort about how do we spend the money, given that one of our buckets of spending is around well-being and health related issues. That is where there could be community engagement on healthcare related questions. So that is the substitute for the healthcare listening tour. So a portion of the questions that would be asked or the engagement process in the broader listening process.
But then the appropriation to have that higher level expertise available to the legislature would remain.
Well, that's still being worked out. Yes, that is a separate issue, and I haven't seen our response. I'm a little bit worried about the $175,000 price tag on that, and I would like to understand that better. So that's still being looked at.
By whom?
Our healthcare committee, whom I believe is speaking with people on your side who are interested in this. I hope. And I will confirm that as soon as Gads, we've blown through the noon hour. It is now 1 o'clock.
Oh my gosh, and I haven't fed, all right.
We haven't eaten.
Shall we try to come back at, what, 3? 2:30, 3?
We're going to be off and on the floor, and Teresa, we're in committee at what time?
Right now.
Oh,
1 o'clock, and you're back on the floor at 2:30.
Well, Senator Kitchell, we can do 2:30 or 3, and you just know what that means if we have to go vote, but.
Okay, all right. Well, let me see, let's try 3. And hopefully we can have some discussion about some of these other sections. Catherine would hopefully have given us something to work from. We might have more detail on that housing, additional money. And then I don't know, we're gonna have to have some discussion about 159. And then we'll look at that intent language piece.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right. Well, I've got to obviously have some other people take a look. I'll talk to Carolyn Wesley about that. So, all right, well, let's try for 3 tentatively, and then hopefully we'll have some of this wrapped up. All
Yeah.
right, thank you.
Thank you.
We're now on the floor.
Going off live.
Yeah, yes, we'll go offline and we'll adjourn until